RIU is different from RIU, who own a hotel, and being careful that we don't get like a lawsuit against us tomorrow. Yeah, so, but we were here first, 15 years actually, so hopefully we're okay. Big thanks to Daham and his team for organizing this event, which is really good, and I hope that it continues to grow into the future. And thank you to all of you for being here. RIU, which is essentially a consulting firm, but has also ventured into the transactions in real estate in more recent years. We have been collecting data on the real estate market for like close to 15 years. Unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, we don't have an abundance of data. So when investors, especially foreign investors, they come to Sri Lanka and they have an issue, they have a problem because there's not much information available. So, given that gap, we have been trying our best to fill the void in market information, which, as many of you will know, is readily available in other countries, in other markets. You can, the market will be typically transparent. You will be able to see what kind of transactions were concluded, when, and the prices. Unfortunately, we haven't got that type of an environment here, but we are hopefully moving in that direction. I'll just take you through today through a few slides, which will hope to shed light on the main segments of the real estate market in Sri Lanka and what has happened up to, I think, this particular quarter that we're in now. A quick overview of Sri Lanka for anyone who's new. Population of some 21 million, and GDP growth going at close to 5%. Inflation under control, apparently. And I think a very high literacy rate, which stands Sri Lanka out in the region and probably beyond in terms of having a high literacy rate. I think this is reflected in the fact that services dominate the economy. So of course, having a very literate population helps with the service sector. Manufacturing and agriculture, which used to be very important in Sri Lanka for the plantations in particular, has tended to decline. Not that the industry itself is necessarily contracting, but its growth has not been at the same pace as services. So the percentage share has reduced over the years. A quick look at doing business in Sri Lanka index. You see that the last couple of years Sri Lanka has been 110 and 109. Again, it's very good in terms of the regional context, but regional as in South Asia, but the feeling amongst many commentators is that there's a lot more room for improvement, particularly in areas such as getting building approvals. I think Sri Lanka lags way behind, and that's quite a concern for this industry, given that it's a central aspect of the whole business model. Another slight concern is the fact that the FDI has tended to dip last year, whereas we have been averaging here, targeting well over $1 billion US net in terms of foreign direct investment coming into the country. For some, we're still finding out why the figures last year have dipped, but apart from that, things are looking fairly good. So looking into the real estate industry specifically, we start with the luxury or semi-luxury apartment market, residential. As you can see, back at the turn of the millennium, there was hardly any luxury apartments in the market, just a few developments. And since then, there's been a very steady growth And since the end of the civil conflict in 2009, the market has really taken off. Actually, if you go back a few years before that, there was a ceasefire between the warring parties, and we saw that the people were starting to build apartments around 2005, 2006. And then the ceasefire broke down, and fighting started, and we saw a lot of projects abandoned. But thankfully, since 2009, things have been looking very good, and the market has just continued to grow. You can see the acceleration there. In terms of our own estimates, we've had to revise our databases almost every week now, because the launch of new projects has been accelerating, particularly in the last couple of years. And I think what I should inform everyone is, we do not cover every single project which claims to be a luxury apartment project. We have just really put our net out and captured detailed information on the large projects, 30 units or above. So you're typically looking at a project of 8 floors and the big ones. So beyond this, you could probably multiply that by 2 to get a feel of the total apartment stock. Quick look at the landscape. See some of the larger ones coming up, for example, Astoria. On 320 was probably the biggest one around for a while. And the average tends to be a couple of hundred units per development. Here's a few more. This is the same thing by year of entry into the market. Moving on. One of the key parameters for analyzing the market is, of course, the price. So within the luxury condominium segment, for our purposes, we've put them into 3 different tiers. So tier 1, we're looking at a square foot price of over 35,000 rupees per square foot. Below that, it's 20,000, 35, and of course you have tier 3 as well. And you can see what's happening in Colombo is that the tier 1, these are the projects which are positioned at the top of the market, the Shangri-Las, the Altairs, Waterfront, for example, have tended to be located very close to the center, the Colombo 1, Colombo 2 areas of the city. As you go out, you see more tier 2 projects coming in, and as you go to the suburbs, you see apartment prices which are a lot more modest. And if you look at the square foot prices, the average in prime Colombo is 44,975 per square foot. If you go into Colombo 7 and Colombo 8, it drops by some 10,000 rupees per square foot. And likewise, when you go out to the suburbs, it's at a different level, 17,000 rupees per square foot. So the market is evolving. We didn't see any of this a few years ago, but what we see now is the evolution of something which is like emerging into a bit more maturity in the market as more developers come in and buyers are a lot more knowledgeable excuse me, than they used to be. For example, in our research a few years ago, that when you used to ask people, how big would you like a 3-bedroom apartment to be, people were clueless because the concept of the size of a 3-bedroom apartment in terms of square feet was very new. But now you ask people, that everyone will tell you they'll have an opinion, they'll know what is decent size and what is spacious, etc. Product mix, another useful parameter to analyze, especially if you're a developer and if you're looking to build. You like to know what your product mix should be, how many 2-bedroom, how many 3, how many penthouses, etc. So I think in the Colombo market, we have seen the 3-bedroom unit has been the most popular. If you take the entire database of some 12,000, it accounts for some 64%. By comparison, if you analyze it by 3 different tiers, you'll see that the 4-bedroom unit tends to appear more in tier 1, which is the highest priced product. If you go to the second tiers, the product mix tends to be more 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom, which probably isn't surprising. The size of apartments, as you can see, and as you would expect, analysis by tier shows you that as you move up the tiers, the size of a 3-bedroom apartment increases as an average. So in tier 1, a 3-bedroom apartment can be as large as 2,000 square feet. And by contrast, in tier 3, it's a very small percentage that has apartments that size. So again, you're probably thinking, not surprised at all. Okay, looking at the demand side, who's buying these apartments? So we've done our own research here very recently, because speaking to developers, you see that when you're trying to sell a product at $1 million each, how many people are out there who can afford to buy an apartment priced at that level? So again, keeping with the tiers that we mentioned earlier, the market for tier 1, we would be looking at people who have liquid assets of 100 million rupees. If there's anyone here today with liquid assets of 100, our desk is in the corner over there. We'd like your business card. You can have a free magazine. Seriously, so the growth rate here, according to many of the wealth management firms, the banks, client relations, etc., who we covered in the survey, is a very healthy growth rate. As you can see, it consists of people who are based in Sri Lanka and people who are dual citizens, have nationalities in other parts of the world. And we're looking at something close to 40,000 people who have that kind of spending power. So they're in the market for an apartment which is priced either side of $1 million. Tier 1. The profile, CEOs, traders, retired people, the age profile, maybe 45 to 65 is the majority of this group, and partners of large companies, etc. So, moving on to tier 2, we've defined this again with respect to the apartment supply. So from the demand side, if you look at who can afford an apartment which starts at 30 million, 35 million, 45 million, in that range, you're looking at family businesses, top doctors, top lawyers, and business leaders, SME leaders, etc. This group again, according to our research, shows very, very positive growth trend within the Colombo setting. We're looking at a number close to 65 to 75,000 and growing, and mainly based here. And tier 3. Tier 3 people typically will buy an apartment to live in rather than as an investment or as a second or third or fifth property which they will rent out and make rental yields, etc. as an investment. So tier 3 people typically go for an apartment 10, 15, 20, 25 million. When you say tier 3, you're still looking at the top 10% of the population within this luxury segment. They will typically go for a bank loan, at least for half of the value of the property. Here you're looking at up to 10% of the Colombo population, which is maybe 230,000 people. They earn up to about 700,000 rupees per month. So that's the domestic market, but I think increasingly Sri Lanka is going to sustain the very healthy growth rate in real estate that has been enjoying over the last 5, 6, 7 years. You have to look at the overseas market. According to our calculations, there are more than 2 million Sri Lankans living overseas with a permanent connection to Sri Lanka in terms of financial connection, bank transfers, property, as well as having relations, etc. live here. So this is a very large number. Going back to the supply, we're looking at 12,000 units, double it if you take all the small projects. So if you're looking at 2 million people who may want a second home in Sri Lanka, and a few have already invested. There's a huge market. Canada, UK, Europe, Australia are the traditional sources of non-resident Sri Lankan investors, but increasingly the Middle East as well, which is emerging from the blue collar to white collar. Is it the other way around? Yeah. And last but certainly not least, foreign investors. According to our data, foreign ownership in the tier 1 range is at 5, 6, 7%. And we feel that could be a lot higher, especially if there was more clarity on the part of the government in terms of what could be done. But I think we're getting there slowly in terms of some level of understanding of what foreign buyers can expect, what they can do, what is permissible, etc. And if the healthy growth rate is to continue for the next 5 years, again, it's very important that Sri Lanka does maintain and remain attractive to foreign investors. RIU has recently had many inquiries from all parts of the world of people who are interested in Sri Lanka, would like to own a property, would like to start a business here, would like to live here, etc. Especially those who've been here on holiday. I think the challenge is, and this is beyond what anyone in the private sector can do, is to get people and convert their interest in Sri Lanka to something material and tangible in terms of getting them to actually invest. And I think for that, again, we have to focus back on that doing business index of the World Bank, where what we see, I think, is that many people get turned off by the process of mobilizing an investment here, which could be made a lot, well, it could be a lot more, it could be simplified compared to what it is today. But just to clarify, we did visit the authorities and we did tell them that a lot of our clients, etc., are asking these questions. So according to the paperwork, if you're a non-resident or you're a dual citizen or you're a foreigner and you want to buy an apartment here, on paper it's simple. You just transfer the money to a SI account, and if you sell it after 1 month, 2 years or 10 years or whatever, then the government will not stop you from taking the money back to London or New York or Sydney. So that's residential. Commercial property, very quickly. The commercial space in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, the use is estimated at about 40%, which has grown over the many decades as the city has become more attractive to primary office space demand. People want their headquarters here, the banks, international firms, travel agents as well now, increasingly. It did not used to be the case 8 years ago. There was a security blanket in the city, people moving out of central locations into the suburbs. But since then, people have moved back and occupancy has been very high, close to 100% in what we can define as grade A space, which is only a couple of handfuls of developments that can say that they could be considered even as a grade A development. What we have seen is developers have rushed into real estate in the residential sector for the quick returns, and commercial property has been neglected. Obviously, when you build a commercial tower, you cannot expect to sell it. Not in the current climate, so typically it's a lease model. When you're looking at a lease model, your return on investment is much higher, much longer than if you're looking at a residential. So in that respect, people have not rushed in to build commercial space. But we see this changing as more and more people enter the residential market. There's a perception that, okay, everyone's doing this, maybe we should look at the other real estate segments as well. So in that sense, we see that more people are coming to commercial property. And very soon, and hopefully with the introduction of REITs, we can expect to see developers selling office space, which happens in other markets, but it hasn't happened here yet, where instead of leasing if you're an SME, it's quite an attractive proposition. Instead of paying your rent over a 5-year lease, you may be able to pay a mortgage over 5, 10, 15 years. And at the end of it, your company would get to own the asset. So as you see, the cumulative supply on the right has continued to increase, and we've seen that going up towards 5 million square feet at the top end of the commercial real estate market. And I think the important thing to note here is that nothing much happened from 2002, 4 to, and there's a gap, and then things started moving again. So again, that was because of the rush to build residential, where the commercial market was neglected. And down and below, you see some of the main developments. The World Trade Center has always led the pack in terms of having the best facilities and the highest demand, highest rates as well. A quick look again at the occupancy levels. As you can see, the occupancy levels are close to 100% in most of the developments. And the important thing to note is in the next 3 years we expect perhaps another million or 1.5 million square feet to come into the market as big developments such as Havelock City, who are building a commercial tower, come into the market. A quick look at retail malls. Essentially, retail malls have been around for quite some time. But I think mainly due to the growth in tourism, there has been a very high occupancy level in recent years, which has prompted again developers to think about building malls and how that can be a profitable venture. So many of the malls that we have today are close to 100% occupancy. And we cannot just put our finger on domestic retail market to say people are getting more money, so they're going shopping. That's not the whole picture, and may not even be half. The real story is the fact that tourism has grown from 500,000 to 2 million in 5 years, and it's set to grow further. And in that context, the retail malls have done very well. We did some research recently on the retail profile. As you can see, apparel, accessories, gifts, IT, electrical are the most important retail items. And on the right, you see the supply of retail space, which is hiking. We may consider that there's a danger of oversupply, given that several very large developments are building quite large malls in the next 3 years, 2-3 years. But if we consider that tourism is still growing and it's forecasted to continue to grow with a double-digit rate, then we should be okay. I don't think we're looking at oversupply. The prices per square foot, of course, have been rising over the years, and at the moment, if you want to rent shop space at the Dutch hospital, for example, you'll be looking at something like 700 rupees per square foot. quick look at land prices. People come to us and say, is it true that the perch in Colombo 3 or whatever is 15 million or 18 million or whatever, and it is. The growth is hard to explain. It's very high and we don't know if it can be sustained. But one of the key drivers in the market is that anything large of 30, 40, 50 perches and above in a prime location such as Colombo 3, Colombo 1 or 2 or 7 gets grabbed up very quickly by developers. It's nothing much available. And people who do hold large lands in these places tend to ask very high prices, knowing the market as it is. So that's part of the reason. Can it be sustained? So we forecasted a couple of years. We feel it will continue to grow. Beyond that, I think with the introduction of the port city, for example, the market will normalize. We don't think it will suffer in any way, because if we take the port city, for example, it's going to position Sri Lanka at a completely different level, where the entire real estate market will benefit in terms of demand for Colombo. So, yeah, optimistic, cautiously. A quick look at tourism. We've got some latest data from the SLTDA. It shows that 2 million tourists, which was the revised target for last year, was achieved. And the earnings from tourism has continued to grow as well. And the occupancy levels, as you can see, Colombo City probably rates that's the highest. So again, we've had a lot of people coming in and saying they want to build a city hotel. If you see occupancy levels there, then it's understandable. Of course, location, targeting, positioning, all these things are very important if it's going to be successful. That's it. It's a little brief, some snippets from our report. If anyone has any easy questions, we need to take it.
Hi, I'm Prakash. Just now you were talking about the port city. I just want to know that will they come up with flooding the market with lands which might be sold at less than the current value, or maybe more?
I think you have to ask the port city, but from our point of view, we don't see that as a potential danger, because according to our knowledge, the lands that are being offered at the port city are very large plots. And so essentially they'd only really compete with the UDA in terms of plots that size within Colombo, right? So, and secondly, what you said about pricing, according to the information that we have, the port city is pricing it at a very similar comparable market rate that you would find in Colombo 1, Colombo 2, etc. And again, I think that port city is a completely different concept. Once that gets going in the next 3, 5, 10, 15 years, you're looking at positioning the city at a completely different level, so everyone should benefit. It's not a case that it's going to divert demand. I think the purpose of the port city will be to increase the size of the pie, so everyone does benefit. And so we're very optimistic about it. Yeah.
Hi, Anuja. You have given this tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 selling prices. Do you have any idea on the construction cost?
Okay.
You have categorized as well semi-luxury and all these things.
Yeah.
So based on that, what would be the pricing square foot rate, the costing
for luxury apartments?
For all 3 tiers?
Yeah, I think if you take all 3 tiers, to be in that category of a semi-luxury apartment, you'd have to start with a construction cost of at least about $50-60 US, and it will double. It will be that much higher, maybe $150 per square foot. I think very recently the price of sand has gone up. So it's a very sensitive indicator because the cost of construction varies a lot with international prices and the local market, etc.
One more small question. How do you demarcate or differentiate the semi-luxury and the super luxury and the luxury apartments? What are the main factors you consider?
Right, good question. So we have listed out all the features and the facilities that are available. So some have, coffee lounge, basketball court, and more sophisticated laundry points, etc. But pretty much everyone has a swimming pool, a gym, Wi-Fi, some of them, a front desk, etc. So we've listed out all of the building features. And secondly, the apartment fittings, we've rated them as well. So those are two. Then we look at location and then price. Those two are kind of interconnected because price is a function of location. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
And we're looking at around 750,000 of 21 million of the Sri Lankan population. And in terms of per square feet, we're looking at 35,000 per square feet. But do you think, even with the addition of the port city in terms of supply, can we meet that demand? Because especially we're looking at around 2% of the Sri Lankan population buying these properties, and foreign investments are also dipping down. How do you look at prices being stabilizing in the future?
Yeah, so that is a more conservative expectation on the market. I think Port City won't be an issue, as I said, for the reason which I mentioned. Of course, this is subject to the government doing a reasonably good job in managing the macroeconomy, and subject to some level of international stability. Hopefully President Trump won't press any buttons. So, citrus barbers, as Trump said, it should be okay. The second point is important. So I think if we fail to reach out to the non-resident Sri Lankans and the foreign investors who are interested in Sri Lanka, if there's a failure to reach out and convert interest into tangible investment, then we could see the prices taking a hit. What we feel is my team have been looking at the danger of that by trying to monitor the rental market, which at the moment appears to be okay. So one of the first signs that the apartment market may be facing some kind of short or medium term saturation could be that. Having said that, I think the danger then is pushed up towards tier 1 at the top end. If you look at tier 2 and tier 3, we see a growing number of people becoming wealthier and having the spending power to buy a luxury apartment within the domestic market. And every day the traffic situation gets worse. So people want to be located centrally, they want to be near their schools and their offices, etc. So the demand will continue, and every year something like 15,000 new homes are approved just for Greater Colombo. So another factor is people's lifestyle. If the idea that rather than live down the road from your parents, you get married, you live down the road, you get a plot and you build a house, or instead you go into an apartment. And so if you shift just 50% of 15,000 just in Greater Colombo to the apartment market, then of course I don't think the developers have anything to worry about. So there are a few factors, but at the moment I don't think there's a red light there.
Thank you.
My name is Razik. I came a little late, so you may have answered that question, but there's a talk about real estate growth in this country, and there'll be an oversupply very soon. Do you foresee anything like that?
Again, I think oversupply is a danger at the top market, and the risk is higher. But as we stand today, there's no real indication that there's an oversupply. In the next 3 years, you might get another 2,500 odd units. entering at that top end of the market. We feel that the developers will not, of course it'll be a challenge, but we don't feel that there'll be any surplus stock. The inventory we expect will be sold. And as you go to the 15 million to 30 million apartment market, we're not really worried about that because, as I was saying, demographics support people, the demand. If you try to buy a 10 perch land in Colombo 5 or 4, even 10 or 8, many people can't afford it. So really the option is to buy an apartment because affordability will have a bigger catchment.
Then I see a number of condominiums are coming up all over the city. Of course, even in the outskirts, you find apartments are coming up, but condominiums are sprouting up just about everywhere. I see. I have seen what has happened in Dubai, and I'm just wondering whether there will be. Is anybody monitoring this with the way of providing approvals for condominium developments? Does the City Hall consider these things into?
Yes, it's a good question. Of course, the UDA, so there's a procedure that everyone has to follow to get approval, So the UDA will, for example, if you take Colombo 7, you won't see many tall buildings because there are zoning restrictions. Similarly, if you buy a plot of land, there is a restriction on how much of that plot you can build on, the buildable area. So you have to make typically the government will ensure that you have some open spaces for light, for trees, etc. And I think the new megapolis regulations are going to tighten it so that we have more green cover, etc. Added to that, from a personal point of view, I think, being someone who loves trees and nature, I think Sri Lanka and Colombo is attractive to, for example, tourists because people see it as a very green and nice city, especially in the central areas. So how do you accommodate a growing population in a limited space, such as Sri Lanka is a small island, so whilst maintaining some kind of a green cover? So traditionally we've had vertical developments going along the main roads typically, and that is not the solution to accommodate a growing population in the Western Province. So the only real answer is, of course, vertical to accommodate it. Yeah.
Just one more question. I don't see any encouragement by UDA and so on to adopt solar power and rainwater harvesting, that sort of thing. Isn't there should we take more interest in doing this? Because the power consumption, the cost of, I spend a lot of money. Nowadays the temperature is very high and you have to use air conditioners.
Yes.
There's no, and also power, the cost of electricity is never goes down.
Yeah.
So doesn't the government take an interest, as far as you know, in encouraging developers to use photovoltaic cells and do solar power?
It's a really good question. I think for the last 10-15 years the government has had a target of 20% renewable energy. Correct me if I'm wrong, if there are any energy targets here, which I think was revised to about 10% renewable. Sri Lankan energy is supposed to be quite environmentally friendly because we relied heavily on hydropower for many years, and now we're shifting towards that. But you're absolutely right, we're not tapping into the true potential for solar power, etc. The government really should give incentives. Similarly, they should of course give incentives to people who want to buy a clean energy car, but I don't think that's there either. I think it's the other way around. So it's a real, upside down situation. And I think even the issue with rubbish to energy is something which they should be doing. So actually, yeah, the success of the city in terms of real estate market depends on all these things also coming into play. Hopefully it will come in